Hi, Simon.
Hey, Lisa.
We've done 35 episodes,
Yeah,
which
somebody
I
somebody
can't
asked me
believe
last
it.
night at dinner, like, how's the podcast? They're all, what are you doing tomorrow on Friday? And I'm like, well, I'm recording a
Recording.
podcast. And they're like, oh,
You
how many
know,
have you done? A couple of those? Three? I go, no, 35.
35. I can't believe it. It's amazing. I mean, and it is actually, I think, it's been over a year that had been talking about it. And then I
Oh,
think our
yeah.
first one was maybe in the fall, November, just yeah, October, November, something like that. But I recall that there are things that you and I keep saying over and over again. And so today we want to kind of cover off on some of those things that we always preach.
Yeah. I mean, there's sort of a set of marketing rules that I think a lot of them are pretty timeless that we've tried to incorporate, right, in our different businesses and our, different work that we've done and things like that. So,
Well, let's get into it. So I think we've got eight that we've determined that I don't know, marketing rules that we always
yeah,
preach. And well, what I was going to say is, while I think there's one or two that we say over and over and over and over again, almost ad
too
nauseum.
much. Yeah.
Yes. I think maybe if we approach it with more of a how to build upon something. So literally the first thing that you and I talk about is having a foundation in place. Like that, you have to start with that. And so I think one of the things that we talk about is knowing your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Or knowing even more than your target audience, right? Because I think that you have to have something, using the word target is something that helps you have a goal, right? Helps you decide that um, this is the people who are going to convert, or hopefully, most likely, going to convert.
That's true. And the converse of that is trying to appeal to everybody.
Yeah,
It's like if
absolutely.
you're just and there's a time for that. So the billboards that I hate is that's a general, you're not targeting any one person.
So
It's just the
this
masses.
Yeah, and it gets to our funnel conversation, which seems to come into a lot of this, but at the
It
top of the
does.
funnel, building awareness is fine. Like, you're doing a brand campaign, like, who are
Yeah.
you? But
Yeah.
if you're
Maybe
actually
you don't even know.
trying to generate a conversion, you have to target somebody, right? And you need to create sort of a persona for that
Yeah.
customer.
If you don't know who you're going after, if you don't know who your target audience is, then you're going to probably waste a lot of money like on ads and maybe creative development and whatnot if you're just aimless. So I'd
Right.
say know who they are and don't generalize. That's kind of a thing not to do. And then I guess that's a kind of a quick win is developing a persona. So you put yourself in the shoes of this prospective customer who your target is. And we've talked about personas before too. So, there's another episode about that where we talk about who your target audience is. So you can refer to that if you want to know. I'm trying to think if I know I've gone back and forth in other organizations where we've not been focused on the customer. It's been more focused on what we're selling. And
Mm,
there was literally, I was at Rational Software, which acquired a bunch of different companies. And so people actually had brand recognition for something called Rational Rose, which was a Rational company, Requisite Pro, which was a company that we acquired, Clearcase, which was a company that we acquired. And they didn't resonate with the audience, but we actually changed our website to be like, are you a developer? Are you a tester? And it actually confused people. So even though so we
yeah.
ended up doing both because it's like, for prospects that didn't know us, the role based kind of approach was very effective, but the product based was very effective for the people that knew us. So our existing customers. So we kind of ended up doing both. So that's kind of an example of like when it might, you have to, again, who are you talking to? Are you talking to people that are
Right.
familiar to you or less so?
Again, and where are they in the funnel? Right.
Yeah. Are they buying again? Are they, first
Yeah,
time buyers? Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. Well, why don't we go on to the next one? What's our number two?
Well, I mean, I think it's always have a plan. I mean, there is, like, just sort of marketing without a plan is like marketing without a target audience, right? It's
Mhm.
kind of you're just gonna
You're
shoot
just
from the
guessing.
hip, and you're just guessing. And a lot of times, I think too, people just immediately jump to doing something tactical and haven't really thought about the strategy. We talked about this a lot, right? The idea of if you're going to promote something, let's say on social or even word of mouth or whatever, what's the logical next step that you want your potential customer to take, right? Do you want them to land on the main homepage of the website, or they need a specific landing page? Or, what are you going to do if you're emailing or you have a co-branding opportunity, right? And then where do
Mhm.
you send people? You need to figure all those things out to really
Mhm.
think about a sort of strategic approach to marketing. I think it's really easy to see an ad from somebody who will help you with your social media and say, okay, help me with my social media, but you don't have a plan. You don't have any goals, right?
Yeah. So I guess that would be my kind of tip is to like make sure you set goals at least with before you start a campaign. So there's the broader kind of marketing plan, or there's maybe you have a broader business plan. And then eventually it sort of works its way down into a tactic like a social post. But it's like, why are you doing this? Like you have to know to what end, or you're just
Right.
doing it for the
Yeah.
sake of doing it, or like, you have to have goals. So maybe that's part of it. The plan also is tying goals to it.
Right.
Do you have any examples of, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of, it
Hmm.
is what it is. Like,
Yeah.
make a plan, like what is it that we're doing? We have you know, we want to, let's say you've got business goals. We want to reach this much revenue. And maybe there are people that are working for you that don't have that view, but you have to break it down, next level down. What is it that marketing's contribution is? And then
Yeah.
maybe that has a goal. Maybe it's in the social post example, we want to get more followers because that's going to show that we're reputable or whatever that is
Sure.
that you're trying to do. So you got to kind of get that in there.
I will say that you can get into a situation though where you spend so much time planning, you don't actually execute well. Like you're executing, people are so like finessing the plan. And I think back to
Yeah,
like
you got to
Black
get
Friday
done.
plans. It's like, we have an idea. If everyone agrees to this, like we can
Just
adjust
do
as
it.
we go, but we need to start going. And I
You just
think
have to do it.
you just got to be sure that you don't spend analysis or planning paralysis, rather,
Mm.
like analysis paralysis. So,
Yeah, exactly.
and
Good
so,
call.
speaking of Black Friday, it makes me think of our next sort of tip, a marketing
Yeah.
rule is really focus on simple, clear messaging.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about it. Confused customers, they're not going to purchase. And if you have to make them do the math, if you have some weird percentage off, or you haven't really evaluated what message really motivates someone to move forward, it's not going to you're not going to generate income. I remember we had like there's an expectation in Black Friday timeframe that some product in your portfolio is 50% off, for example. And if you make it like save up to or something like that, you can potentially like people start searching around, well, where's the 30% off product? Where's the 50% off product? I think there's probably other examples,
Well,
right?
I mean, I think of more like something came up, and I don't even know if I can really articulate this in a generic way, but it's like, when you have to over explain something about
Mm,
what you're offering, it's like you're not going to be able to sell it. I mean, I got to admit that I struggle with Rob's in my game. People, he and I have been doing something that we're calling busking. So, busking are musicians on the street that are,
right.
so we're going down to downtown Mountain View on Friday afternoons. We set up our game, we start playing. We've got a bunch of boxes there. We've got this sign that says, like, free game, donations, volunteering, or whatever, like donations accepted or something like that. And people are like, what is it about? And we don't have a succinct answer. And Rob is the one that's very good at this. I don't like talking to people. And he's like, oh, he'll start with so this is a board game that we made, and it's about cruise ships totally fighting each other. That's how we start. And then they're like, well, then how do you do it? And then we're like, well, the object is you try to get as many points as you can. Like we try to do this sort of like progressive disclosure, but it's hard for me. And it's just, it's also hard for me to even talk about it with like the it's something that I have done, and so I am modest about that. Like, it's different
Right.
when I am selling something for a company that I work for or I'm providing value to.
Yeah.
It's very different for me to be doing it in another way. So
Yeah.
it's a little tricky, but that's an example that I can think of.
I mean, I think the other thing, just to sort of close out, is be clear. Don't necessarily be clever. That's a mistake people make, right?
I mean,
Is
you can still be clever as long as it's clear. Like it's as long as
exactly.
it's not confusing. So, I mean, I think different was that's I thought that was like that's a clever campaign and it's not confusing anything. It's
Right.
like that's to me it's a clear message of why. They're like that was more of a brand message if you will.
Right. Right.
So another thing that you and I have talked about, well, actually, one last thing on that front, we had a full discussion about messaging with our good friend Mimi Rosenheim. That was one of the earlier episodes, so you can reference that. We will put a
Absolutely.
link. And then tip number 4, or marketing tip, are we calling these tips? Rules. Let's call them
Rules.
rules. These are things
Yeah.
that you should do. Always provide value. So there is volume is something that is, obviously we want to try to get as many sales as we can, but always think about value and less about you want to like during the economic downturn, if you can provide value to whatever your product or service is, that is going to trump any other thing. So you can kind of what's the word? Something the storms. What's that
Weather.
expression? Weather the storms if you are providing value. And even some of the things in providing value might be like Simon and I give away free content. We're like, here's how you do stuff. This podcast, we are trying to provide value and we're doing it for free. And so
Right.
it's more of a, over time, if anybody thinks about, oh, I need some marketing help, maybe they'll think of us. So we want to provide value. We're trying to educate people. It's an example. Got any other
Uh,
thoughts with that?
yeah, I was actually thinking about I work in a nonprofit world, and one of the things that we're always trying to do is build up a donor base, right? But you can't, speaking of sort of leading with the value, it's sort of an inverse value. It's like, here's the things that you could impact. And we always lead with like the impact. So there's a problem, and then here's the impact. So when we're talking to people, we're not saying just donate. We usually say, here's the impact, and often offer, like you said, the example of something for free. We basically say, come visit our site, do tour our programs, things like that, way before we make an ask for someone to donate money or whatever. Start with like visiting, and then it could be that we look at, you can volunteer, right? We're, again, depending on the donor and things like that, we may or may not, want to push too hard on the dollar thing. But I think that the idea that, sales, you can do it too soon. Another example that popped in my mind was some of the web stuff that we've done, where people land and immediately say buy now
Yeah,
versus learn more, or product
right.
info,
Yeah.
or see the story. It's sort of like, again, how are you too soon in the funnel to
Yep.
ask for the sale, right? Does someone not really understand your product or not believe in you before they're willing to make a purchase? Because I think, trust is really important. People want to know that they're going to get what they're buying, kind of thing.
Yeah, you made me think of an example. So many companies offer a free trial of something or like
Hmm.
a, yeah, free trial, free consultation. And during that period, or if it's a one off thing that you're offering, if it's a free something, if there's a way to give resources during that time so that they
Hmm.
get the most out of that trial, if it's a 7-day trial, maybe you send them an email every day, maybe you send them a guide that they can kind of get the most out of it. Maybe you offer a 15-minute consultation to help with the, getting started or something like that. So
Right.
that's adding value even before they've even made the sale.
Sure.
That I think is and if you have to communicate that. So I think that's part of it. It's like adding value but also kind of communicating that you're going to get this value,
Right.
and then not being too salesy. I think that kind of feels like I don't feel like I'm valued. And then maybe it's, then I'm not going to trust you, because you're being too pushy.
Sure. I sort of related to what we were saying about website and the purchase right at the landing page and things like that. I think more important is mobile matters, right? The rule number 5 is that you should be thinking about designing for mobile devices. I mean, in this day and age, most of traffic is mobile, and most could be 60% for some sites, but it could be higher now for others because literally if you're doing email campaigns or social media, people are checking that by and large on their phone. And if there's a link, they're going to be staying on their phone, right? To a
Yeah.
desktop. I'm
Yep.
sorry, not to a desktop site, but to the mobile version of your website. And I think a lot of people still design desktop first. Like so many
Definitely.
meetings still.
Well, and I think it's, designers have this nice big screen. And so
Yeah.
they work on it that way and they don't think of it. But, there's two things that I think of in this. One, think about the context. So, one, for sure, I've seen QR codes on boxes in retail, like at a Best
Hmm.
Buy or something on
Yep.
software.
Yep.
You take your phone, you scan it, it is on your phone. Like that is
Right.
that. So clearly, if you have a QR code, it needs to be mobile. Like that
So
is its purpose. Yes.
related to this is like
Yes.
I would pick up a prescription at the pharmacy and there'd be like 6 printed pieces of paper with all the, legal and the side effects and the study data and why you probably will die when you take this medicine, and it's like that crazy stuff, right? Literally yesterday I got one sheet of paper and it says if you want all the details, scan this QR code, right? And I'm not going to do that with my desktop computer, right? I'm not going to hold
No,
up a QR code
I know.
to the
Yeah.
camera and again, everything is everybody's doing everything mobile, right?
I have an exception to that though. So if you happen to be selling something that tends to be to an older audience potentially, maybe
Mm,
that is not true. They might be more desktop. So you have to I mean, I agree with you. You got to like you can't forget about mobile. And mobile's been around for a long time and still we don't think of it. So do think of it. If it's an email, like most definitely the email service provider you have automatically formats it
mhm,
nicely for you, but you
right.
also have to check it like it gives you the option. This is what it looks like desktop. This is what it looks like in mobile. Look at it because that's important.
Again, you're right. It's going to depend on the product you're offering. There are a lot of things that I do that require filling out an application, right? Cutting and pasting. I am not going to do that on my mobile phone, right?
Yep.
And there's a
Right.
lot of attachments and there's all this. That is definitely, if you're more business focused, if you're selling to a business audience, business people still use laptops, right? And if we're,
Yeah. Right.
you
If you're
know,
B2B, yeah, I guess it depends.
but
But
if you're
you
again,
still, people might be like going on a walk and they're like, use their phone to research.
exactly.
That's what
I
I
mean,
do.
even if you're B2B and but if you're doing an email push or a social push and someone can follow through, make sure
Yep.
it's mobile for sure.
Definitely.
Okay.
And so, but wait, no, I've got to say, if you want
Okay.
to know more about this more about this
Small
though,
screen topic.
small screen topic, we talked about website basics. We have
Mm,
another episode there, and all these things that I'm going to reference. We have links up here somewhere. Get it added back on. Hey, rule number 6. All right, this is one I think that we talk about
a lot.
all the time, and I bet people could even say it before we even say it, which is always measure and always track. So data drives decisions is really what it comes down to. So you have to measure everything. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if things are changing where it's like things are magically happening, or like you could just ask ChatGPT or Claude or
To
whatever.
track your stuff.
Something like, can you tell me how many people? And it's like, oh, this is how many people, whatever. It could probably tell us, but you still need to be making sure you set things up so that you tag and track things. And I will say also, this is very much it's a scale of sophistication. So there is
Mm,
the baseline of just like get your analytics in place. Like it's very easy to set up a Google Analytics account and it is free. So number one, you absolutely have to do that.
yeah.
From there, it gets a little bit more complicated, but you have to start to connect your email, your advertising. You have to start connecting those together so you see how
So
it all works together.
right. And I
Yes,
think,
Simon?
yeah, you mentioned track everything, but realistically, start with a subset, right? Start with the basics. If you're doing a lot of email or whatever, and that drives a lot of your marketing
Sales, maybe?
strategy or sales, if you know, see if you're not measuring, you don't know, but you assume, right? And again, like you said, lots of the social platforms have dashboards in them, but they can't tell you when someone leaves the social platform what happens unless you've hooked everything up, as we say.
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
Start with a few key things and see what's happening, right? I mean, one of the things that if you're a small business and you have a very simple website, track the click, make sure your clicks from say your homepage to any sub pages, especially ones that you're thinking are helping convert. You want to make sure you have those. And then I think that, like, not just starting small just so you get comfortable, but have just three KPIs, right? It might be click through, it might be you just measuring your conversion at whatever that is. If it's a form or if it's a checkout, obviously, if someone calls you, you're not going to be able to make that connection, but pick KPIs that you can measure, kind of thing, is what I'm saying.
Key performing indicators, if people don't know what that is. I
Sorry.
don't know if we've ever spelled that out before,
I
but
think we have. And I think we
okay.
talked
Well,
about it in our analytics
analytics
episode.
analytics episode, which is called Stop Marketing in the Dark, an analytics
Right.
overview. Gosh, I had something that I wanted to add to that and now I
No, you
forgot.
didn't.
What did you I don't know. It'll come back to me.
I said,
Man,
make sure you start with a subset of tracking.
I remember now. Okay.
Yeah,
Um just so even though we say you got to measure everything, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I know
sure.
I'm contradicting myself only because, like, I know I personally have gone down these rabbit holes where I'm looking at something and I'm like getting into the details of analyzing something. And then I'm like, what about that? And what about that? And if I have the luxury of having an analyst to help me with this, sometimes they have to put me in my place and be like, what are you going to do with that information? So, and
Right.
I'm like, nothing, I can't. Like, so you have to be able to act on it is something else that I would mention. So,
That's a good point.
like just check yourself. So there are sort of typical things. So there is a concept of vanity metrics, like even I don't know if a bounce rate is a vanity metric, but it's something that I feel like you don't really know. We've talked about this before that I don't know how effective it is because maybe it means somebody came to your that page and they got the answer they needed right away. And so maybe that's a good thing that they kind of quickly saw something, but then maybe it's a bad thing because it was a mismatch because it was a Christmas tree and a rabbit. I don't know. You had some funny example last time, but it's like, so maybe there's a mismatch and so they just
Yeah,
bounce.
right.
So that could be kind of like a vanity metric, but do you have top things that you would sort of tell people that like you should measure these three things? What would you tell? What would you say?
I mean, you want to know think about your funnel and start with like how many people are coming to your site, right? And again,
Mm-hmm.
look at things as trends. We didn't touch on that, but trends are probably more important than say a raw number. So how either look at it
Yeah.
as a rate or
Yep.
over time, every week. And I would say you want to measure your KPIs are probably again, what's your funnel conversion look like, right? And then e-commerce site where you're selling a product, it's going to be product page visits, add to cart, and then checkout, right? And conversion. So there may be 3 or 4 steps there. In a site where you have a form to contact us or fill out for more information or whatever, again, that's sort of homepage or landing page clicks or visits, then visits to the add to cart or the form page, and then the completion of the form, right? Submitting, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to your point earlier, those tied to source. So you're saying how many people from my Instagram ad came and actually filled out a form? How many people came from my Facebook page and actually filled out a form? And then you start to say, well, which of those two platforms is more valuable, right? It's driving more traffic or more conversion. So all
All
right.
right.
And we
Rule
sort of
number 7. It kind of
it's
segues into it. That's why we did it this
exactly.
way.
Yeah.
So why don't you take us
Oh,
through.
I was just going to say that um I mean, always be testing, right? Continuous
Yeah,
improvement. The idea
always.
that if you're looking at that Facebook performance versus, say, Instagram, and you see that one is working better than the other, you can either say, well, it's because of the platform, right? The audience that you have there.
Mhm,
Or
mhm.
maybe there's something different about the ad, right? Again, you want to be careful though, testing too many things at once because you're not going to be able to tell then what the impact is. But you need to be making changes and optimizing because nothing stays the same, right? What we know about one market today's might not be the same in a
A
month or
year
6 months,
a year. I feel like
right?
longer is
I
yeah.
mean, we used to joke about with websites, it was like launch it and leave it, right? People
Yeah.
didn't make the commitment to keep it fresh. And that is freshness is a Google factor
Mhm.
and how well you're going to rank and things. It'd be interesting if freshness now is a factor for the AI summaries because that's the
I think it
way that
is.
web is
Yeah.
going.
Right. Well, let's not get too off
And
topic.
I think
We
you
talked
need,
about that, yeah, somewhere else.
well, I'm just saying that they're all related to optimizing your experience, right? And maybe maybe your more offline business, you can still be testing things in the sense that you could do a different brochure, you could have a different tactic, like top of funnel message, and see which one resonates better as you talk to people or if you're sending things out. So I think something that it would be really good for everybody is just try doing an A/B test, one this week, and remember it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks to get good data, but create a test and start a test. And again, there's lots of tools that are available that are free.
Well, email in particular, if you have an email platform, almost all of them offer this concept of A B testing. It's literally will split two different versions. A whole other episode on that topic. So I won't go into in more detail.
Right.
But, and then there's other, I think people, like I was saying that Rob and I are doing this busking, and I think we refine our message each time we talk to people. And so in a way, we're testing it. We try it and then, okay,
It's
if
a
that's,
little
yeah,
less structured, a little
it's
more
not right.
organic.
Exactly. So that's my point though. It's like usually you do set up tests in a very structured way, but then I think there's sort of informal where you're just sort of pressure testing something. That I
Right.
think is valuable as well.
Well, and I think that leads right into our next rule,
Our
which is
last
really
one,
about
rule number
relationship,
8.
building a relationship, and the idea that first person you talk to in a small business can really impact, for example, if someone's going to engage with you or not, or how you treat customers or how you treat your vendors and things like that. All of that relationship building is really critical.
Yeah, and it again, we've talked about this I think throughout other episodes where it kind of builds trust. And it's funny. I remember I worked at Symantec and I was on the consumer side, but my colleagues that were on the enterprise side, which
Hmm.
was the Symantec brand versus the Norton brand that I was working on,
Right.
they used to, it was like the sale would happen, with salespeople and whatnot. They're selling into an enterprise. And then after the fact, they would get a package that's like, here's your software to download. This is the way that was in
Mm,
the day.
yeah.
And it was like no branding, nothing. It was just like, here you go. It was like garbage. And my peer, who the equivalent of me over on the enterprise side, she was like, this is the beginning of our relationship with them. We need to treat them like they're important to us. And so she did this whole
Right.
revamping where the package that arrived was this beautiful thing so that they would like want to keep it. And it was like this very nice introduction. And that was sort of the, real beginning of the relationship of this customer, because everything before then is pre-sales.
Right.
But I thought that was very effective. And that's more of like a don't just, you forget about them once they buy. That's why there's all these other like loyalty programs and things to like keep that person warm, if you will. So you
Well,
can do it on a digital way, but you can also do it on a personal way if you've got people coming into your office or something, like, building that rapport with them.
and I think you can do it digitally too nowadays. Like I feel like there's so many sites still where you fill out a form and it's for more information or whatever, and all you get
I've
is
got
thank
another
you.
thing about that. A company that I'm working with, is their customers are older, and so I was like, "You know what? Maybe we should think about working with AARP." Like they in AARP has a um almost like a shopping portal where they've got all these things that are at discounts. You can get, wireless discounts and,
Hmm.
whatever. And went to their website. There's the best I could find was a forum for advertising, and I'm like, "Well, that's the closest to it." Filled out the form, heard nothing. So then I find a contact us, go to the contact thing, and it ends up I get a bot, but it ends up they send me to a person. The person said, "Oh, you can email advertise at aarp.org." So I do that. I get an automatic thing that comes back that says fill out this form. And then I was like, I wrote them back, even though I don't know if it's going anywhere, but I was like, I
Right.
filled out the form and I didn't get anywhere. I'll fill it out, but I filled it out and it's not doing anything. I still fill out a form. This just happened yesterday, and I still haven't heard anything. And I'm like, don't you want our money? Like, it's
Right.
like it's maddening. I want to fix it. Sorry,
The
AARP. Bad experience.
Yeah, I mean the fact that you give your information and nothing in return. But I think it also happens. I recently tried to email, like people will say, email us with questions or follow up. And so I've been emailing and I haven't gotten any response. And I'm like, is your office closed? Like, could you send me a note that says, sorry, we're out of the office on vacation? I don't know. It's like,
Awful.
very surprised, and I'm thinking this is a law firm, by the way, a small law
No.
firm, so
Yeah.
I'm just surprised, just really surprised, so
Yeah. That stinks. All right. Well,
but
those are our 8 rules.
yep,
What were you going to say? Something else?
no,
I was going to try to. Okay. But are there any of these rules that you actually break? I probably do.
yeah, I mean,
You know
that
what? I mean, there's sometimes I work really quickly, and sometimes maybe I don't have a good plan in place, and I might jump to the tactics right away. So I'm guilty of that. You?
yeah. I think one of my ones is there's always, speaking of time pressure and things like that, you feel like you can't test and optimize. I mean, the reality is, it's just not, people are like, I don't want to test. Like, we just need to do this, or I think that, right? I don't have time to wait to see what the results are. So I think it's a, in figuring out
Patience.
how to do that. Yeah. And plan again, if you have a plan and you say, well, we're going to test this, maybe you can test something currently without waiting for your new campaign or your next change, or and
Mm-hmm.
still to have learnings and things like that. So
Yeah. Yep. Well, okay. So one of the things that we thought about, so we've gone over these 8 things, and so we can put it back on our listeners and viewers on having kind of like doing their own, checking themselves on do they follow
sure.
these rules with a 8-week challenge to do one of these things a week. So why don't we
Yeah.
go over some of these things of what people can do?
Let's just read them out. I'll
Rattle them
start with
off.
one. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
go.
first week, audit your target audience knowledge. Figure out who your persona is. Who are you targeting?
Yep. Second week, create or review your marketing plan. So something that it should be, if you don't have one, maybe you create one.
Right. Week 3, simplify your messaging. Make sure it's clear. Clever is okay, but it's got to end up, really explaining whatever you're trying to get across.
Yep, exactly. Week 4, audit your value to promotion ratio, I would say. So we were talking about being value driven and just check yourself. This one should be fairly easy. It's just like maybe as you work on tactics, you just look at that. Am I being overly promotional, or is it
Right.
am I
Build that
adding
trust.
value?
Right.
Exactly.
You're not just all about, that's like those furniture stores where everything's always 75% off, going out of
And they're
business.
always
And
going out
they're
of business. It's like,
exactly,
really? Yeah,
I
I
don't
know. It's
trust
so
you.
true. Yeah, exactly.
Week 5, everything is mobile.
Hmm.
That's, I think,
Yep.
all needs to be said.
Yep, exactly. Week 6, set up proper tracking, which honestly, you probably should have been doing this already. Then maybe this is something that you do earlier, but it's like you got to, or maybe it's like it's an
Always be
audit. It's an
measuring.
audit. Always be
Yeah.
measuring. That's our mantra.
Yeah, if you don't have if you do have tracking, that's a good point. Do an audit week 6. So week 7, start an A/B test.
Yeah,
Just
could
in
be something.
email, or it could be
And
2 different ads on social.
well, the other thing I was thinking is like just from a ideation standpoint, maybe you just catch yourself where you're like, if you're thinking about if it's a decision, sometimes people just decide, all right, we're going to run this. And I'm like, how do you know that ad, that email, that whatever is the right one? maybe you have a couple of options. So, like, to me, it almost helps with decision making too. So maybe that's how you frame it in terms of thinking about how to set one up.
Absolutely.
And then the last one is more about the like creating, making sure you have follow up. So maybe if
Yeah,
somebody becomes
exactly.
a customer, you've got a welcome series or
They fill out a
email,
form,
one
they
email.
get what
Yeah,
they want, or someone calls them, or have a plan to follow up with people. Absolutely.
exactly, exactly. And I guess then go back and thinking about the making sure you've got these are all sort of foundational in my mind. And just if you kind of have these things set up first before you try to start chasing trends.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So pick one, start with the first one. Maybe your 8 are a different order or you have an additional one, but start with these 8. And we'd love to hear from you if you have a rule. Maybe you break it sometimes, which is fine, but
Yeah.
what are some of your rules when you're dealing with the marketing of your business and things like that?
Rules, and then also let us know if you've done any of these challenges and let us know your output or how it's been working for you. And if you have any questions for us, you can always shoot us a note on if you go to itsmostlymarketing.com. Do
Ask
not
the
forget to
host.
subscribe. Do not forget to subscribe.
Subscribe on every platform.
All of the are you subscribed, Simon? I
I
don't know if
think so.
I hope so. You
I
better
need to go
be.
back and look.
Better
Okay.
be. Got to get Susan subscribed. Rob's not a subscriber. I need to get him to subscribe.
Man.
Well, I
Yeah.
even told him, I said, I don't know if I really want you to listen to it, to be honest, because, I don't know. I talk about him, and so I don't want him to know I'm talking about him. So
Well, from tangents to tactics.
it's mostly marketing.